Somebody left a card. That's where I keep starting when I try to make sense of this. Not with the footage, not with the reward money, not with the ransom notes sent to a celebrity gossip website instead of, say, a law enforcement agency or a private negotiator like every professional kidnapping operation in recorded history has done. I keep starting with a card, a small paper card, left in the door frame of a house on the morning of February 1st, 2026. The same morning Nancy Guthrie was reported missing. Adult Protective Services. That's whose card it was. And I've been sitting with that detail for weeks now. Because the more I look at it, the more it feels like the kind of thing that should have generated a much louder conversation than it has. The kind of thing that, in a different case, with a different level of noise surrounding it, people would have stopped and said, "Wait, hold on, can we just talk about this for a minute?" So let's talk about it. Arizona law requires Adult Protective Services to respond to reports involving missing elderly individuals. The mandatory response window is 24 to 48 hours. That's the legal framework. That's what the statute says. Show up within 24 to 48 hours. Assess the situation. Document what you observe. The card appeared within approximately 6 to 10 hours of the disappearance being reported. 6 to 10 hours. Now I've heard the reasonable explanation for that speed. High-profile case. Savannah Guthrie's mother. Systems can accelerate when visibility is high enough. A supervisor makes a call. Someone gets dispatched immediately. I understand that explanation. I'm not dismissing it. But here's the thing I can't get past. The front porch of that house, based on documented observations from people who were present in the hours and days after the disappearance was reported, based on reporting from outlets that covered the scene before it was fully processed, appeared to show evidence of a disturbance. Evidence that was serious enough that law enforcement investigators returned to that property not once, not twice, but multiple times over the weeks that followed. Returning to collect evidence. Returning to process things that hadn't been fully processed on prior visits. So, someone from Adult Protective Services, a person whose job involves assessing the welfare of vulnerable adults in potentially dangerous or unusual situations, walked up that porch within 6 to 10 hours of the disappearance being reported. On a morning when that porch may have shown visible signs that something had gone wrong, and that person left a card and walked away. No documented call to law enforcement from that visit. No report that became part of the publicly acknowledged investigation. No statement from APS about what their worker observed when they stood at that front door. No follow-up visible in the public record. A card. And then the investigation proceeded as if that visit hadn't happened. As if whatever that APS worker saw or didn't see at that front door on that specific morning was not relevant to anything. I don't know what that worker saw. I genuinely don't. Maybe they arrived before the porch showed anything unusual. Maybe the timing places their visit in a window when nothing visible was present yet. Maybe there's a completely ordinary explanation for all of it that I'm missing because I don't have access to the internal communications of the Arizona Department of Economic Security. But in a case where every minute of the early timeline is forensically significant, where the sequence of who was where and when matters enormously to understanding what happened, where investigators kept returning to that property because something wasn't finished. In a case with all of that surrounding it, the absence of any public information about what an APS worker observed when they visited that porch 6 to 10 hours after the disappearance was reported is strange. That's the word I keep landing on. Strange. And I think it deserves to stay strange. I think we shouldn't let it get explained away too quickly because the comfortable explanation and the accurate explanation are not always the same thing. Let me put the card down for now and go somewhere else, because there's something that happened this week that I think is genuinely significant, and I want to approach it with the care it deserves. Someone spoke. A former student of the last known person to be with Nancy Guthrie on the night she disappeared. The individual the sheriff's department has publicly cleared, who has not made any public statement about the case. A person who, by their own account, spent years inside this individual's classroom at a private school in Tucson where he worked as a biology teacher. Years. Not one semester, not a brief encounter. Years of sustained proximity to a specific human being, observing how he moves and speaks and carries himself, accumulating the kind of knowledge that only comes from actually being around someone. This former student has been posting on X under the account name Silly Goose. And before I say anything about what they posted, I want to talk about something that I think matters more than what they said. When they started saying it, the account wasn't created when this case went viral. It wasn't activated when the reward hit $1 million. It wasn't there during the peak of the media cycle, when thousands of people were flooding every Nancy Guthrie adjacent account with observations and theories and claims. This account was posting when nobody was watching. Months of quiet posting, almost no followers, responding to things, noting observations, contributing a perspective that essentially disappeared into the void because the audience wasn't there yet. That's not the behavior pattern of someone who wants to be seen. That's not clout chasing. That's someone who believed they had something relevant to say and kept saying it regardless of whether anyone was listening. I've been doing this long enough to know that distinction matters enormously. The people who surface in high-profile cases purely for the attention behave differently from people who actually know something. The timing of when they speak is different. The quality of their language is different. The specificity of what they say is different. This account had specificity. The former student said the individual in question is 5'9". Plainly, not approximately, not somewhere around that, 5'9". The kind of specific measurement you carry in your head because you stood near the person repeatedly, because you observed them in a physical space relative to door frames, to other people, to furniture, to the architecture of a classroom you spent years inside. 5'9". Now, I have to be clear about why that matters, because height in isolation doesn't mean much. One of the central forensic questions surrounding the doorbell camera footage, the footage released by the FBI showing a masked individual approaching Nancy Guthrie's front door, is the physical profile of that individual. Height, build, proportional dimensions visible in the footage against reference points like the door frame and the architectural features of the porch. Community analysts, retired law enforcement professionals, and independent researchers have been working on those proportional estimates for months. And a former student, posting quietly to essentially no audience, offers a specific height measurement grounded in years of physical proximity. They also said the beard, the eyes, the build, the walk, consistent. That was their word. Not identical, not proven, consistent. They said the physical characteristics visible in the doorbell footage are consistent with what they remember of this former teacher. I need to be honest about exactly what that means and what it doesn't mean. Resemblance is not evidence. A social media user looking at footage on a smartphone is not a forensic analyst working under controlled methodological conditions. And the Pima County Sheriff's Department has publicly stated, on the record, that the last known person to see Nancy Guthrie has been cleared. That is the official position of the law enforcement agency with primary jurisdiction over this investigation. So, I'm not presenting the student's observation as a conclusion. I'm presenting it as exactly what it is. A person with years of first-hand knowledge of a specific individual looked at publicly available footage and said the characteristics are consistent with what they remember. That is categorically different from a stranger pattern matching with no relevant knowledge. Source matters. Context matters. The quality of someone's observational foundation matters. I want to stay on the walk specifically, because I think it's the detail that has generated the most serious independent examination, and I want to be honest about what that examination has produced. The individual in the doorbell footage has a distinctive gait. If you've watched that footage, you've probably noticed it without necessarily being able to articulate what you're seeing. There's something in the way one foot tracks during certain steps, an outward rotation, a specific pattern in the way weight shifts that doesn't look like the average walking stride. Forensic gait analysis is a recognized discipline. Courts have accepted gait evidence. It is a legitimate area of scientific investigation. The way a person walks is shaped by bone structure, by old injuries, by muscle memory developed over years of movement, by joint conditions that affect range of motion. It's not easily faked. It's not easily replicated accidentally. Community researchers watching this case have compared the gait pattern visible in the doorbell footage with separately documented footage of the cleared individual taken from other publicly available sources. What they keep flagging is not just the angle of the foot in certain steps, but something that appears to suggest limited range of motion in one knee. A foot tracking outward in a way that can indicate a joint that doesn't flex fully. There is also separately documented drone footage shot by community members covering this case that shows the same individual at the Guthrie property at various points after the disappearance. In some of that footage, specifically in a clip where he bends down to reach something at ground level, he appears to keep one leg extended rather than bending fully at the knee. A possible restriction in range of motion appearing in a completely different context from the doorbell footage. Two separate pieces of publicly available footage. Two completely different situations. The same apparent physical characteristic visible in both. I am not making a forensic conclusion. I am not overriding the official investigative position. I am describing what independent examination of publicly available material has produced. And the former student, separately, without being prompted by the gait analysis conversation, also mentioned the walk, from their own years of classroom observation. I don't know what to do with that, but I don't think I should pretend it isn't there. Let me shift, because one of the things that makes this case so difficult to process is that the questions don't exist in isolation. They connect to each other in ways that are hard to see until you step back and look at the whole picture. The property is one of those connection points. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 163 days. Her home is an active forensic location. Investigators have returned to it multiple times. It sits at the center of an open investigation involving both local law enforcement and the FBI. And yet the property is maintained. The pool is cleaned. The landscaping is tended. The utilities run. Someone enters and exits regularly. Someone with access. Someone authorized to be there. The question of who is authorizing the ongoing management of that property has not been answered publicly. The legal frameworks that would normally govern the property of a missing person, power of attorney, court-authorized estate management, formal documentation of who has the right to make decisions about that house while its owner is gone, none of that has been discussed publicly in any confirmed form. There is a specific individual who has been filmed at that property repeatedly by community members using drones. This person arrives in a white Tesla, has access to the backyard, and has been observed on multiple documented occasions performing a specific and unusual maintenance activity. He picks up the garden hose. He walks to one specific flower bed. He waters it, and he leaves. Not a general watering, not a sweep of all the plants and flowers requiring irrigation in Tucson's desert climate. One specific location. A long rectangular bed that appears to be mostly plain dirt, possibly containing a single small tree. The flower bed on the opposite side of the yard is reportedly full. Active growth, plants that look regularly tended. He goes to the empty one. I want to be honest that ordinary explanations exist for that. A newly planted tree needing more water. Irrigation equipment below the surface requiring periodic testing. But the pattern is what's visible. And in a case where the property itself may be relevant to understanding what happened, a pattern is what people are going to examine. There is also documented footage of the cleared individual alone at the property, moving around the back of the casita, the small guest structure, on what appeared to be his own initiative, in an area that includes the same general ground where the Tesla person has been observed watering. What he was looking at or looking for has not been publicly established, but the footage exists and has been documented. Now let me talk about the ransom notes because I think they're one of the most misunderstood aspects of this case, and I want to say something about them that cuts through the noise. Professional kidnapping operations have a logic. That logic has been documented across hundreds of cases. Proof of life to establish credibility. Contact through a channel that can facilitate a transaction. A method designed to convert a situation into money as efficiently as possible. The ransom notes in this case were sent to TMZ. TMZ is a media outlet. Sending a ransom demand to TMZ is sending it into the public domain. It is making it a news story. It is ensuring that it becomes part of the public narrative of the case, rather than a private negotiating instrument. Professional kidnapping organizations do not send ransom demands to celebrity gossip websites. A note sent to TMZ is not designed to collect payment. It's designed to be seen, designed to shape what the public understands about what happened. If the goal of those communications was not to collect payment, and the structure of how they were sent makes them functionally useless as ransom demands, then the question worth asking is what purpose they actually served, and who benefits from a ransom note that creates a public kidnapping narrative rather than initiating a private negotiation. I don't have a confident answer. What I have is a framework. When something happens in an investigation that doesn't fit the pattern of its stated purpose, you ask what other purpose it serves, what it accomplishes beyond what it claims to accomplish. A note sent to TMZ accomplishes one thing clearly. It establishes publicly the narrative of an external kidnapping, someone unknown, someone who wanted money, someone out there. That narrative is useful to someone. The question is who? September 10th. Derrick Callella, a person federal prosecutors charged in connection with this case. The charge related to a specific communication sent to Annie Guthrie Cioni that federal prosecutors characterized as obstruction. The message said, "Did you get the Bitcoin?" That message is remarkable for something that doesn't get examined carefully enough. It assumes shared knowledge. "Did you get the Bitcoin" is not a communication from someone who heard about a kidnapping on the news and decided to insert themselves. It assumes the recipient knows exactly what Bitcoin is being referenced. It assumes awareness of a specific transaction or expected transaction. It assumes context that both parties already share. That's the kind of message you send to someone who has already been part of a conversation with you. What that conversation was, what the nature of the relationship between Callella and Annie Guthrie Cioni was, what Callella knew or believed about what happened to Nancy, all of that exists somewhere in the federal investigation and none of it has been publicly released. Callella entered a C1C plea agreement. Prosecution and defense negotiate a specific sentence. The judge at sentencing makes a binary choice. Accept the agreed sentence or reject the entire agreement. September 10th is the sentencing date. If the judge accepts, Callella is sentenced and the case moves forward without trial. Whatever Callella knows stays wherever it is. If the judge rejects the agreement, the case goes back to the possibility of trial, to the possibility of testimony, to things being said in open court, under oath, on the record, that haven't been said publicly yet. C1C rejections are relatively rare, but they happen, and in cases where the agreement seems inadequate given what the defendant's knowledge represents, judges have declined to be bound by what prosecutors and defense agreed to. Watch September 10th. I think about the reward the way I think about a silence that should have broken a long time ago. $1.25 million. 163 days. No confirmed public lead produced by that reward. Rewards work. They've broken cases with far smaller amounts. The calculations people make about loyalty and self-interest and money are real, and they move. $100,000 has produced witnesses who stayed silent for years. $250,000 has broken circles that seemed sealed. $1.25 million hasn't produced anything public. That silence is meaningful. Either the people with knowledge are not primarily motivated by money, meaning they have other reasons to stay silent that outweigh over $1 million, or the circle of knowledge is so small and so unified that no peripheral witness exists who can be reached by a financial incentive. Either of those says something significant about the nature of what happened and who was involved. A spontaneous crime by an unknown stranger would almost inevitably produce adjacent knowledge. Someone who saw something, someone told something after the fact, someone whose connection to events becomes legible in retrospect. That circle doesn't tend to stay completely sealed for 5.5 months in the presence of $1 million reward. The silence doesn't prove anything, but it is consistent with a circle of knowledge that is very small, very intentional, and very motivated by something other than financial exposure. Let me say something about the neighborhood itself. The Catalina foothills is a specific geography. Elevated terrain, winding residential streets, properties with significant distances between them. Not a corridor, not a place you pass through, not a neighborhood where unfamiliar vehicles sit on dark streets without being noticed. It has cameras, extensive private surveillance infrastructure, Overlapping fields of view from multiple devices on multiple properties covering the same streets from different angles. No vehicle has been confirmed departing that neighborhood after the event. The FBI asked the public for help finding footage from surrounding intersections and streets. They were looking for evidence of a departing vehicle. That evidence wasn't produced. In a neighborhood with that density of surveillance, at a time of night when traffic is low enough that a single vehicle would appear on nearly every camera it passed, the absence of captured footage is remarkable. There are two clean explanations for it. Whoever was involved knew exactly where the cameras were, which implies prior surveillance or prior knowledge that eliminated the need for surveillance. Or no vehicle departed because no vehicle arrived from outside, because whoever was involved was already there. I don't know which is right. The FBI asked for the footage and couldn't produce it themselves. That tells you what they didn't find. And what investigators couldn't find in a neighborhood built for observation is significant. The porch footage has gaps. I want to name this clearly because it's been noted by people who have watched the footage carefully, and I think it deserves to be part of the public conversation. The footage does not show a continuous, uninterrupted sequence of the individual's presence at the door. There are cuts. Moments where the footage moves from one point in the sequence to another without showing the transition between them. Some of that is technically ordinary. Doorbell cameras buffer and record in chunks. Processing latency creates discontinuities. This is explainable without requiring anything to have been altered. But in a case where the authenticity and completeness of the footage is itself part of what investigators are trying to establish, where that footage may serve as foundational evidence in any future proceeding. The question of whether it's complete and unaltered is not procedural. It's foundational. The FBI released that footage. Questions about what the full unedited record contains versus what was made public exist and haven't been answered publicly. I've been watching this case from the beginning. I've watched the community around it grow and shrink and refocus. I've watched theories rise and collapse. I've watched the official narrative shift and occasionally contradict itself. And through all of it, one thing hasn't changed. Nancy Guthrie is missing. She is an 84-year-old woman who built a life in that house in those foothills over decades, who had mornings and routines and the kind of private existence that most of us take for granted, who had a birthday on January 27th, 5 days before she disappeared, that came and went without the photographs and celebrations that her family's public social media presence would otherwise have documented. She is not a theory. She is not a narrative. She is a person. And the people who know what happened to her have been carrying that knowledge for 163 days while $1 million reward sits uncollected, while investigators return to a property again and again, while a community of people who never met her spend their own time and energy trying to find her. Something is going to break this case. These things don't stay sealed forever. The circle of knowledge exerts pressure on itself over time. People close to a secret start to feel its weight differently as circumstances change. September 10th is a date. The forensic results exist in a file. The DNA exists. The physical evidence collected across multiple investigative visits to that property exists. The card that APS left in that door frame exists. The former student exists and can be formally interviewed by people who have the legal authority to do what social media observers can't. All of it exists. And eventually, it surfaces. If you have any information related to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the FBI can be reached at 1-800-CALL-FBI. The reward is $1.25 million. Anonymous tips are accepted. The investigation is active and ongoing. We will be here for every development.